you guys about characteristics of graphs, and these are the characteristics that we're looking at. We're looking at domain and range. We're looking at where the graph is increasing and decreasing. We're looking at maximum and minimums on the graph, x-intercepts and y-intercepts, and the end behavior, what happens to the left side and the right side of the graph. So before I go into it a lot, I want to make sure you guys understand that when you're looking at a graph, you're just looking at a snippet of the graph. And so really, like this graph, for example, really should have arrows going on to show you that it goes on forever. If you do not see arrows, just assume that it goes on forever. The only way you can assume it stops is if you see an endpoint or something like this, or an open endpoint, right? Otherwise, assume that the graph goes on forever. So talking about linear functions, because that's what I have here. So looking at domain and range. Domain is all the possible x values and range is all the possible y values. So again, don't limit yourself to what you see in this screen. There are arrows going on here. So the domain for a linear function is going to be all reals, and the range for a linear function is also going to be all reals. So here, this same graph I zoomed out of, and this took a picture, so you can see it's the exact same graph. It's just that I zoomed out so you could see how the x values continue to get larger and larger, and the y values continue to get larger and larger. So this is why for domain we say all reals. I could have kept zooming out. Same thing for range. The range is all reals. Again, could have kept zooming out. So here, looking at this graph, again, this has arrows on it. They're kind of hard to see, but they're there. This is a linear function, so the domain is all reals. And in all honesty, you're going to assume that the domain is all reals, unless you see it cut off, like unless you see just a snippet of something like this, then otherwise the domain is going to be all reals. Same thing with range. If you don't see where it's cut off somewhere, the range is going to be all reals as well. Okay, so the range here is all reals. Maximum is the highest y value. Minimum is the lowest y value. Well, this graph is going on forever in both directions. So the maximum, there is none, and you need to put none. Don't put 0. If you put 0, you're saying it's here at 0. So you don't want to do that. And then the minimum is also none. This graph, if you look at it from left to right, it is going down. When you're looking at increasing and decreasing, you're looking at it the same way you read a book. You're looking from left to right. And so here, when I look from left to right, I see that it's going down. So this graph is always decreasing. But if it's always decreasing, that means that it is never increasing. The x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis. So this crosses the x-axis here at -1. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So in this case, that's going to be here at -3. The end behavior to the right, that's this. The graph is going down, so we say that it falls. And over here, on the left side of the graph, because you know you've got this is the right side, this is the left side. So the left side of the graph, it's going up, so we say that it rises. All right, so now I want to talk about exponential functions. So this is the one, don't stress out too much about this because we haven't spent time talking about exponential functions, so I know that it's very new to you. But exponential functions kind of have this shape. I call it a skateboard ramp or a J shape. So the 4 exponential functions are going to look they're all going to look exactly like one of these 4. Okay, so they're the same shape, just going in different directions. And so you're going to notice that it's always going to be rising or falling on one side, but on another side, it's going to get really close to a number. So this graph looks like it's going to eventually hit 5, but it doesn't. On the screen here, I show here is 5, and so I kept zooming in, and you can see that it's not getting any closer. It's getting closer to 5, but it's not actually going to ever hit 5. So because of that, we say that it approaches that number. We never say that it's equal to the number, okay? So here, again, the domain is all reals. I see that I've got an arrow here, so it's going on forever in both directions. So the domain is all reals. Now, the range, because this is the highest value right here where y is 3, the range is not all reals. Now, the range is everything below it, because we see we've got all these y values here below it. So we're going to say that the range y is less than 3, because we're not going to say or equal to, because remember, it doesn't ever actually hit it. It looks like it does right there, but it doesn't. So the range is that y is less than 3. For the maximum here, we're going to say that there isn't one, because we don't know the highest y value. We're just going to keep getting higher and higher. And then the lowest y value, we don't know. So there is no minimum. Again, say none. Don't say 0. This graph is never increasing, because when you look at it from left to right, everything is going down. The y values are going down from left to right. So it is never increasing, but it is always decreasing. All right, I got a lot going on here, so let me erase all this. All right, so the x-intercept here is where it crosses the x-axis. I'm just going to say that's about 1.5. I know that's not exactly it, but the x-intercept is at about 1.5, and the y-intercept is here at 2. It's where it crosses the y-axis. Now, for end behavior to the right, this is the right side, it is going down, so it falls. Over here to the left, we're not going to say that it rises. Rises means that it's going to keep going up in that direction, and that's not the case. Remember, I told you it's going to get really close to 3. This is the number 3 here, and it's kind of hard to see. So we say that it approaches 3. Okay, just a hint on exponential functions. One of these, either the end behavior to the right or the end behavior to the left, is always going to be approaching some number, always. Okay. All right, so here, again, I've got arrows on them. So the domain is all reals. And I can't say that the range is all reals, because it takes a turn here, and there's nothing that dips below -2 here. So this range is going to be that y is greater than or equal to -2. There's an actual point there. It does touch -2, so I can say or equal to. The maximum is none. We do not know the highest y values, but we know that the minimum, the lowest y value, is going to be that y is equal to -2. All right, so now for increasing from left to right, when I am, oops, that's not the eraser. All right, so when I'm looking at this graph from left to right, it goes down, 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 down. There's that minimum where it changes directions, and then it starts going back up again. So when I look at this graph, that was bad. All right, here is where x equals 1. So this is the side where x is greater than 1. This is the side where x is less than 1. So this graph is increasing when x is greater than 1, but it is decreasing when x is less than 1. Okay, because this is increasing, and this is decreasing. Okay, so it's decreasing when x is less than 1, increasing when x is greater than 1. All right, and then I want to find the x and y intercept. So the x-intercept, I have 2 of them. I have one right here at -1 and one at 3. So -1 and 3. The y-intercept is here at -1. The end behavior to the right, it rises. And this one's going in the same direction on both sides. So this one also rises as I go to the left. All right, last one. This is a quadratic function. It's a parabola. Not that you need to know that necessarily this year, but you are going to need to know that eventually. So the domain here is all reals. Again, there's arrows right here. All right, the range. So this graph, it maxes out right here, and this is where y is 1. So for the range, we say y is less than or equal to 1. The maximum is where y equals 1. That's the maximum, because again, this graph, it's increasing. Ooh, it's hard to see. It's increasing here. It hits its maximum, and then it starts coming back down where it decreases. So it's increasing, because this is where x equals 3. So it's increasing over here when x is less than 3, increasing or decreasing when x is greater than 3. I'm just going to answer some of those questions. All right, so the minimum. There is a maximum. There is no minimum. It's increasing on this side right here, which is where x is less than 3. And it's decreasing on the other side, which is where x is greater than 3. The x-intercepts are at 2 and 4. The y-intercept, this graph is going to keep going. We can't see where it is, but there is one. We just can't tell from the graph. Okay, so we're just going to say can't tell. The end behavior to the right, it falls, and the end behavior to the left also falls. Okay, there you go. I hope that helps.